Hello and welcome to our special event during this year's virtual ALA Midwinter. My name is Lizette Serrano, your friendly Scholastic neighbor. Although we can't spend time with you in person, it gives us great joy to know that we can continue to connect and recharge about our favorite topic, books, with such passionate and caring librarians. Throughout the program, we'll love to say hello and hear from you in the chat room. Tell us where you're from. I'm sitting here at home in New Jersey, enjoying my second cup of coffee. And let us know what you miss about ALA Midwinter. What do I miss? Obviously, you. I miss being nerdy and talking up all the books, incredible books we have for every reader at the booth. I can pass on having my feet hurt end of the day, but I'm just so glad we could connect in this space. I have the pleasure and honor of introducing our special guest today. These talented authors are shining bright and blazing hot on our spring 2021 list. They each will share the spark that ignited their book and so much more. With that, grab a yummy snack, your beverage of choice, and let's kick this off. New York Times bestselling author Tammy Charles wrote and delivered the most powerful and necessary picture book of 2020, All Because You Matter. Beautifully provided comfort and undeniable affirmation for Black and Brown children that their worth is never diminished. For our upcoming YA novel, Muted, Tammy is also drawing for personal experience and advocating for young Black women. With this ripped from the headlines novel, it's time to click that mute button, be loud as hell, and recognize that there's power when we tell our own stories. Muted will call upon readers to become allies for all women, like Denver and Muted, everywhere. Rising star author Allison Gerber connects deeply with the topical issues facing young girls, and her books help them see themselves, persist, and bounce back from adversity. Allison wore a back brace for scoliosis from the age of 11 to 13, an experience that led directly to Braced, her celebrated debut novel. Inspired by her own struggle with ADHD, Allison showed how this often stigmatized disorder affects young girls in her next novel, Focused. I read recently on Allison's Instagram that she comped Focus as the Queen's Gambit with ADHD for twins. And I was like, yes, exactly. Allison's next book, Taking Up Space, promises to be a realistic and compelling story about dealing with the realities and repercussions of food insecurity and learning that true self-esteem comes from within. Guess who's back? Beloved author Sayantani DasGupta, that too. She engaged our hearts, a sense of adventure, and our minds with the critically acclaimed Kiramala and the Kingdom Beyond series, which brilliantly draws on Bengali folktales and intergalactic science in a story that is part hero's quest, part immigrant coming-of-age tale. Sayantani is turning up the Fahrenheit with another blockbuster action-packed adventure with a proper, fierce, and fitting title, Force of Fire. Introduces a complex and funny new heroine, Pinky, a Rakush demon who must embrace her bad to serve the greater good. We are so excited to welcome a storytelling duo to Scholastic family, a dream team that have woven a story unlike any other. We've watched and admired as Kwame Mbalia has taken the middle grade world by storm with the Tristan Strong series featuring an epic world building on African-American folklore. And Prince Joel Makonnen is the great-grandson of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie, the last emperor of Ethiopia. He's also an attorney and the co-founder of Old World, New World, a media and entertainment company focused on telling African stories that inspire global audiences through film, TV, and books. Their book, The Last Gate of the Emperor, is an Afro-futuristic adventure inspired by Ethiopia's history and folklore. Last Gate draws upon Joelle's experiences growing up as a member of Ethiopia's royal family. This compelling premise sets our protagonist, Yared, on a search and answers in a forgotten galaxy-spanning war. Buckle up for this epic journey to the stars. And now here I am introducing our last author, while I would take a dramatic pause, because we must pay respect to the one and only Sharon G. Flake. 20 years ago, Sharon inspired generations with her groundbreaking and award-winning YA novel, The Skin I'm In. The book also influenced and shaped the YA author landscape with testimonies from Nick Stone, Renee Watson, Elizabeth Acevedo, and Jason Reynolds, who said, quote, Before movements like Black Girl Magic and Well-Read Black Girl, there was The Skin I'm In. The Life I'm In is a long-awaited sister novel that is a difficult yet necessary story for these times. A vivid depiction in which our most vulnerable youth are taken advantage of and traumatized is starkly portrayed. The unflinching narrative is rich in dialogue, research, and signals a message to readers that it's never too late to try and turn things around. Well, there we go. Those are special guests. I hope I did all of you justice. With that, we're going to kick it off and have Tammy Charles talk about Muted.
So I would like to reverse back in time a bit. Let's take it all the way back to the 1980s, which, by the way, is the very best decade of all. I said what I said. I was this kid from Newark, a girl born with stars for eyes. Singing and dancing, acting, playing the piano. I literally did all of that. Thanks to my parents who worked very hard. We didn't have much, but they worked very hard for me to have those lessons. Now, fast forward a bit to the 1990s, also a very, very fun decade when I became a teenager. I entered middle school and I met two girls who shared the same dream as I had. And together we formed an R&B singing group modeled after our favorite singing group of all time, In Vogue. Now, I have a picture there of the three of us, and I have purposely blurred their faces just to respect their privacy. But man, I have to tell you, we thought we were all that, and you could not tell us otherwise. Together, we just shared the same passion. We had the drive, we had the talent, and that drive was so important because that's what led us to try out for every talent show, every festival, every opportunity that we could find to be seen and get heard. My BFFs and I just really enjoyed the journey that is the music industry, but it was a bit of a roller coaster. And here's why, because the music industry does this incredible thing. It gets you hooked, it sucks you in, and then it spits you out at will, leaving you to decide if the journey is even truly worth it. And at some point, we decided it wasn't. This experience from my teen and young adult years being in a singing group, that's what launched the book that would become Muted. Muted is the story of three girls lost in the fire of fame and fortune. And one girl in particular, Denver Lee Lafleur, who tasks herself with muting the monster and saving them all. Now, writing this book was not easy. The process was not easy. I wanted the book to feel like an album. I wanted to showcase Denver's incredible songwriting. And I knew to do all that, I had to write the novel in verse. And I got to tell you, frankly, I was terrified. So there was no way that I could write this book without lots and lots of mentor texts. Enter the superheroes of my life, my local librarians. They were the ones who helped me drown myself in lots of poetry and verse novels. I'd always read them, but I had never written one. So my local librarians added that special touch, knowing what I was working on, knowing what I wanted to accomplish. Every time I came in the library, they had a new book, a new recommendation, a new author for me to introduce me to this world of poetry and verse. Ellen Hopkins, Laurie Halls Anderson, Jacqueline Woodson, and of course the Queen, Maya Angelou. I am forever grateful to my local librarians for their guidance and for their help, because if not, this would not have happened. Muted is a book about power. It's a book about the power of our voices. Muted is a book about being loud and unapologetic in the pursuit for justice and fame and following our dreams. Music was the heart of this book. And because of that, it's what brought these three girls together. So it's a book about friendship and joy and unabashed love. But Muted is also a wake-up call, a reminder to keep your village tight as you navigate and face the tough decisions that come along with life. In this Me Too era, there are so many things waiting to rob girls of color of their freedom, of their joy, and of their future. And because oftentimes monsters don't really have a telltale face, I find that these stories of Black and brown girls who pursue the entertainment industry, those issues that come up in their journey to fame, those are the stories that often get ignored. What I've done here is I have lovingly and carefully poured all of that into Muted, which I'd call this one of my most personal books to date, because I know this world. I was in that world and I could totally see how easy it is to fall down the rabbit hole. My request is that you share Muted widely with all of your patrons. I hope that Muted will leave you inspired to be bold, to be loud, and to be an ally for all the Denvers of the world.
Tammy, that was amazing. Thank you for sharing your story with us. That was awesome. I'm so excited to read your book. I'm Allison Gerber. I am the author of Braced and Focused. My new middle grade novel is called Taking Up Space. It's an own voices story about Sarah, a 7th grade basketball player who is struggling to feel good about her body and herself. Since my debut novel came out nearly 4 years ago, I've met with thousands of kids in libraries and schools, all different types of libraries and schools across the country. And here's the shocking thing that I've learned. Nearly every kid I've ever met has wanted the exact same thing: an adult to listen and take their problems seriously. Librarians are the listeners. You do the work of helping kids find their truth. You give them access to information so that they can problem solve. You help them find life-changing stories. And sometimes, like with me, you give them the courage to find themselves. Librarians were people I could count on when school and home and friends started to become unreliable. For me, librarians were people who listened to me. They made me feel important and like I mattered. And every kid deserves to feel that way. My hope is that Taking Up Space helps readers to recognize just how much they matter and help them to see that if something negative is taking up space in their minds, even if there isn't a name for it, they can and they should ask for help. When I was writing Taking Up Space, I was pregnant with my daughter. For the first time since I was 11, my body felt like it wasn't mine. I felt like I was going through puberty all over again. It triggered my deepest pain, the mixed up way I saw myself growing up, as a person who wasn't worthy of love or of food. When I would share what I was going through with other people, my feelings were often dismissed. I was told that I should feel lucky and that I should be happy because nothing I was going through was real. I didn't have anything important to complain about. It made me feel like my pain didn't count, and my self-esteem started to plummet, and food started to take up all the space in my mind again. I was relapsing. So in addition to a lot of therapy, I was inspired by all of the students and teachers and librarians that I met over the years. I did exactly what I always tell them to do. Write about what you're feeling, and what other people think, it won't matter. Writing gives you power over your own experience. So I wrote notes in my phone. I wrote flashbacks on scraps of paper. And because I was pregnant and not allowed to take my ADHD medication, I was my most honest, uninhibited, relentless self. I was also determined to make sure that my daughter didn't become a statistic. Kids of parents who struggle with food and body image and disordered eating are at an increased risk of developing the same unhealthy behaviors and the same unhealthy relationship with food. What I discovered in all those scribbles was that I was writing a book about self-worth and how we learn to value ourselves, and how for some of us, that journey is long and complicated and hard. In that writing, I found taking up space. Taking up space is about what happens when the adults you depend on aren't always reliable, but how bad information about food can get passed down through generations and can mess up the way we see everything, even ourselves. It's about learning to trust that you're worth believing in, even on the days you don't win or get picked, and about finding the courage to love yourself and to stand up for what you deserve. I never could have anticipated how relevant a book about food and body image would be today. Even before the pandemic started, nearly half of American kids wanted to be thinner. And now, since lockdown started, we know that disordered eating symptoms have actually been on the rise in nearly every age group, although many of those people don't feel that they have the right to ask for help. I hope more than anything that taking up space helps readers, all different kinds of readers, to see that whoever they are and wherever they come from, that their pain and their feelings matter. Now more than ever, we need empathy and support. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. That was absolutely incredible. My name is Kwame Mbalia. I am one part of the duo that wrote Last Gate of the Emperor. And I'm extremely excited to talk about this book because it does something that I've always wanted to see, and I've always wanted to read, and I've always wanted to experience. And that is Black and brown kids in the future, uninhibited with joy, playing, laughing, and experiencing, things that traditionally in traditional media, we have not seen them be able to experience. And at its core, Last Gate of the Emperor is about a child. You might be familiar with such a child. They crack a lot of jokes. They like being the center of attention. And they are searching for their place in the classroom, their place in the school, their place in the city, their place in the world. In this case, their place in the galaxy. And do they butt heads with authority from time to time? Yes, they may. Do they do it out of malice? No, they do not. They are growing. And when we grow, you, I, children, adults, when we grow, sometimes we stretch into uncomfortable things. And Yared is experiencing, unfortunately, one of the most uncomfortable moments in his life, because he is realizing that things that he were told aren't exactly the reality. He is learning that who he always thought he was, it's changing. And he's not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing at the moment. But it's also about children exploring, right? And I can think of, some of my most fond memories, the most fun adventures that I've had, were just me exploring. And that's what Yared gets to do in this book. Yared gets to play one of the coolest video games that I have ever heard about. And I'm excited because, this is something that we created specifically for this book. It is an inclusive video game. It is a battle royale. It is a game about exploring the world around you, challenging each other, making do where everyone is welcome. You can compete in whatever you have. And it is truly fantastic. And listen, I play a lot of video games, and hopefully the joy of that is prevalent in the book. But more important than the joy, more important than the exploration, and more important than finding your growth, we find this relationship with family. We explore, we learn more about our family. We're presented with this image, as children, as to who our parents may be, who our siblings may be, who our extended relatives may be. And then as we grow, we learn more about them, and we learn things about them that are cool. Sometimes we learn things about them that we didn't know. We learn things about them that completely reshape their image in our minds. And so Last Gate of the Emperor is all of that bundled into a rip-roaring adventure, tearing through space, making friends, competing with rivals, hanging out with your cool bionic lioness, who doesn't have one of those. And hopefully you all enjoy reading this story and experiencing this story as much as Joelle and I had writing this story.
Hello, LA. I'm Prince Joel of the Royal Family of Ethiopia, and I'm so happy to be with you and with Kwame, my co-author. I'm the second half of The Last Gate of the Emperor, and I know Kwame and I couldn't be more excited to bring you our new book, which has been a passion project together, and it's so amazing to see it come to life. We're both on a mission to give better representation and stories of power for people of the African and global Black diaspora. So this has just been an incredible journey. The story is set in Ethiopia in a distant future, and I believe it will give readers a truly unique experience in discovering this part of the world, the culture, the history, and the folklore. Because readers will be transported to a futuristic Africa where technology permeates all aspects of life. And like Kwame said, Yared is not always all happy about that. But yes, you will meet our young hero Yared, his bionic lioness Bessa, and his rival turned unlikely ally, the Ibis, who's a tech-savvy young girl and very intrepid. But you'll simultaneously be given a glimpse into the past, into Ethiopia's rich history, stretching back 3,000 years to the era of the Empire of Aksum and its royal dynasty. And it's all made very accessible in a sci-fi fantasy setting for all young readers. So while the story is set in a fantastical world, the readers will get references to real people and places, so they can be entertained in this thrilling adventure, but also be educated and learn some new things. There's references to Menelik, who was the son of the Ethiopian Queen of Sheba, and the King Solomon of Israel. Menelik basically became the first emperor of what is now Ethiopia, but at the time was the Empire of Aksum, which spanned from present-day Ethiopia, Eritrea, Sudan, all the way to the east of the Red Sea, in Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and Oman. It was a vast empire, and Menelik started the Solomonic dynasty. And in Last Gate, there's also references to the two most prominent kings of Aksum, Izana and Caleb. King Izana was the first king to convert himself in the kingdom to Christianity. And then later came King Caleb, who, as Kwame said, is referenced in the Last Gate's augmented reality game, which I wish we could just play in real life because it's so cool. And it's called The Hunt for Caleb's Obelisk. And Yared and the Ibis, they absolutely love to play it and compete against each other. And little do they know what adventure this game would take them on. But as I was saying, King Caleb is referenced as an Aksumite king. He's most remembered for fighting off invading forces. And in Last Gate, you will see that this theme comes up about fighting for your independence and fighting would-be invaders and coming together and unity make you stronger. And so Caleb, actually, King Caleb, his burial site is not really known. So in a way, the hunt for Caleb's obelisk continues till today. And then many centuries and generations later came Emperor Haile Selassie. He was the 225th and last emperor of the Solomonic line. Emperor Haile Selassie was my great-grandfather. He reigned for about 45 years, but then was deposed and killed during a communist revolution that shook Ethiopia. And my family was just scattered. Some fled and some weren't able to. So as a personal note, the story in Last Gate of the Emperor is also a very personal one, as we discussed and drew inspiration from these lessons that I learned in my own upbringing. I grew up as a prince in exile, separated from my home country, my family, and my people, and it wasn't easy. I didn't really know my ancestry, and my family, they just wanted to keep a low profile and just survive, really. So I spent many years trying to figure out how to reconnect with my roots and my history. But once I did, it enabled me to embrace my true self and believe in myself. So similar to Yared in our story, who is on a journey to discover who he really is. And as Kwame was saying, so many kids who are on a journey of self-discovery will find motivation in Last Gate to seek their true core, their own story. It's always with you, and it's like a superpower that you can use to do good in the world. And finally, I hope Last Gate of the Emperor will have introduced or reintroduced for some to Ethiopia and spark their curiosity to learn even more after reading about it. As Ethiopia is one of the great civilizations of the world that not many are familiar with, like the Greek Empire, the empires of Rome or China. And we believe it's important for young readers worldwide to expand their knowledge about Africa and its rich history, its contributions of the past that will continue in the future, and especially for children of African descent. This is their history too. And for young Africans, it's also important to portray Africa in the future as this advanced and thriving place in the world, for them to be able to envision all the possibilities. So with that, I can't wait for you to join us on the Last Gate of the Emperor journey. I hope you enjoy the read. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me here at ALA Cybernetically. It's a joy to speak to librarians, our story champions, and of course to be here with my fellow Scholastic authors. And I just want to give a shout out to this group of diverse, innovative, creative geniuses who are putting books out there in the world that all our kids need. Because when I was young, when I was growing up as an Indian immigrant daughter in this country, I never got to see somebody like me starring in the books or movies or television shows that I was exposed to. And eventually I got to thinking, well, if somebody like me isn't the protagonist of anything, maybe somebody like me doesn't deserve to be a hero, even of her own story. Narrative erasure is a kind of powerful psychic violence, especially when you're young. And had I only been exposed to those stories, I might have continued my quest to kind of erase myself, even from my own story. But I was lucky. I got to go on these long summer vacations to my grandparents' house in India. And my grandmother would gather all of us cousins under the whirring fan and the mosquito net. And she would tell us these magical Bengali folktales starring brown kids like me being awesome and heroic and saving the world. She told us stories about princes and princesses on flying horses and evil serpent kings, rock-kush monsters. And I eventually got to kind of see, well, maybe there's a possibility of somebody like me being a protagonist, being a hero, saving the multiverse. And when I had my own two brown-skinned, book-loving kids, they were becoming big readers like I had been. And I realized that despite decades having passed, things had gotten somewhat better in terms of representation for my kiddos, but still not good enough, particularly a number of years ago in the genre that they loved, which was the same genre I had loved, fantasy. Particularly, those few years ago, there just wasn't brown and black and kids of color represented in the books they loved. And so I reached back to my grandmother's folktales and I mixed them with string theory, because why not? And I wrote the Kiranmala and the Kingdom Beyond trilogy so that my kids and all our kids could see themselves as heroes. Kiranmala, the kurta and combat boot-wearing heroine of my tales, is like me, an immigrant daughter. Unlike me, though, she initially discounts all of these fantastical stories her immigrant parents tell her, like how she's really an intergalactic princess from another dimension meant to fight Rakkush. It's not until her parents disappear on her 12th birthday that Kiranmala realizes her family stories are actually maps. They're guides of a sort for her to let her know exactly what she needs to know in order to travel across the galaxy, rescue her parents, find out the truth of who she is, and in doing so, claim her own power. And it's a metaphor, right? Because I always had those family stories, those folktales from Bengal, and they were kind of my initial blueprint to my own sense of heroism. I introduced those folktales with some fun space science in these books because to me, immigrant families are galaxy hoppers, right? We are space travelers. We are heroic adventurers. And all the rhymes and riddles and slapstick humor, I mean, that's my own sense of fun, but it's also tribute to writers like Bengali author Sukumar Rai or English children's writers like Lewis Carroll, who know that a powerful way to critique institutions is to poke fun at them, to make them hilarious and camp and a little absurd. So the book I'm here to celebrate today, Force of Fire, is a standalone set in the Kiranmala universe. It's the origin story of Pinky, a demon queen from the Kiranmala books, who is fabulously terrible and terribly fabulous. She has a cameo on the back of Game of Stars. She's eating the barcode there. When we first meet her, she's just a young Fire Clan Rakkushi. She doesn't want anything to do with revolutions or do-goodery. She only wants to learn how to finally control her magical flames. When she makes a secret deal with Seisha, Prince of Snakes, to do just that, she suddenly finds herself as the reluctant leader of her country's fight for freedom from the Serpent Empire. This is a story about finding your voice. It's a story about not being afraid of your anger or your strength. And also, it's ultimately about adding your own spark to the fires of revolution. Like the Kiranmala books, I was inspired by my grandma's Bengali folktales. But unlike the previous trilogy, Force of Fire is influenced by my own grandfather's real life history, his real life heroism as an Indian revolutionary in the Indian freedom struggle against the British Empire. He actually went to jail at age 15 due to his revolutionary activities and had to finish high school and college while imprisoned. When he died in his 90s a few years ago, he was one of the oldest still living Indian freedom fighters recognized by the government. So it's my hope that Force of Fire is a tribute to both my grandparents and all the strength and fire and stories that they gave me. I hope they know how inspired I am by them and how I hope to pass their inspiration on to new generations. So just to finish up, I want to read you a couple of paragraphs from the story, just to give you a sense of Pinky's voice. This is what she sounds like. Chapter 1, Why None of What Happened is My Fault at All. The day I lost control of my Rakkush power, fire vomited in front of half the school, and then basically started a kingdom-wide revolution, was absolutely not my fault. All right, whatever, maybe it was a little bit my fault, but there were reasons, good reasons, serious extenuating circumstances. What? Don't believe me? Well, read on, and you will. I was in demonic combat class, the class taught by our headmistress, Shurpanakha. The class I was, let me just come out and own it, in serious danger of failing. And since failing combat class would not just tank my GPA, but humiliate me in front of the whole school, I was already feeling like an about to explode pressure cooker. I know, you're probably thinking, Rakkush love a good fight. How could you be failing combat class of all things? First of all, don't be stereotypical. It's not cute. Rakkush, like any other sort of being, aren't all the same. Sure, we have fangs, horns, and tusks, and occasional issues with drooling. Yes, our skin does tend to the warty, and we are, on the whole, strong and fast. But that is not to say we don't enjoy poetry, or elemental physics, or calligraphy. We contain, as they say, multitudes. And so that's Pinky. And just to end, I think I will quote the Bengali Nobel Prize winner, Rabindranath Tagore, whose song threads its way throughout the heart of Force of Fire. It's the lesson that Pinky learns in her adventure, and the lesson I hope readers will take away from Pinky's story. It goes like this. If there is no light, if the path before you rages with dark, then light your own heart on fire. Be the beacon, be the spark. Thanks so much.
ALA, I am so happy to be among you librarians. I spent a lot of my lifetime walking up Lehigh Avenue in North Philadelphia, kicking leaves in the fall, making my way to the library, or being in the library in the public school, a middle school, where I hung out and hid out because I was sort of shy. A lot of you know me because of my book, The Skin I'm In. It's over 20 years old. And for a lot of those years, you, among students and teachers everywhere, kept asking me, when are you going to do a sequel? When are you going to do a follow-up? And, you know, my mama ain't raised no fool. I was like, not ever going to do that, because we've seen movies, we've seen books that we rather had not been published as follow-ups and sequels. Just stop while you're ahead. But I will tell you, 2 years ago, someone asked me that question, and for once I had a different answer. And that answer was, no, I would never write that book. But if I did, it will be from Charlize Jones' perspective. And Charlize Jones is the bully in The Skin I'm In. And I told this person, and I would write about human trafficking. I realized there were some elements about Char's life that made her susceptible to trafficking. The fact that she had been left down twice in 7th grade. Her parents had both been brutally murdered, and she really had never recovered from that. And her sister Juju did the best that she could to make money. But money meant throwing parties and people roaming through the house day and night. And Charlize, in a sense, being bullied and taken advantage, not by the people who came there, but by her sister. So why even deal with trafficking? I'm like a lot of you. I had seen an uptick over the years. And even though I have a 33-year-old daughter, I started to worry and wonder what was happening to girls, what was happening to guys. When I started to investigate and do some research, I found out that human trafficking is a $150 billion business. Yeah, I said billion, right? And $100 billion of that is earned or made off of girls and women primarily through sex trafficking. According to the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, human trafficking is the recruitment, the transfer, the transport, and the receiving of a person via fraud, force, or coercion. A lot of those people, like I said, are girls and they're women. They're exploited, they're taken advantage of. I think a lot of us think you have to be moved from one place to the other to be trafficked, but you don't. When you come to my new book, The Life I'm In, we meet Charlize Jones, and she's sort of answering a question that a lot of you all asked in The Skin I'm In. At the end of that book, Char's sister says that she is going to send her down south to be with their grandmother. Black people send children sometimes south, not merely as punishment, but also as a restart, to give them a second chance. And this book is about a lot of things. It's about human trafficking, but it's also about second chances. So when it opens up, we see Charlize, and she is begging and she is pleading. And if you know Charlize Jones, she doesn't beg anybody for anything. She's a bully in that book, the first one. She bullies Malika Madison. She teases her about being dark. She teases her about being thin and skinny and not having enough clothing. She's a bully. But in this book, I needed people to feel her pain and to understand that the children who get trafficked are just that. They are children. There are children. And they come from urban settings. And they come from California and New Mexico and Philadelphia and the suburbs, and some of them go to private schools. They come from all over the world. Have you ever had to leave home? I know whenever I left home, I wanted to come back, right? Char just wants to stay home. That's where she was born. But she finds herself on a bus and she makes a decision that gets made by hundreds of thousands of teens around the world, I bet. I think I can be on my own. I think I'll run away. And in making that decision, things start to change for her. There's a man, like lots of predators, who's right there when things fall apart for sure, when she's the most vulnerable, when she's the most needy, right? When she's on her own after a while, when she needs food, when she needs money, when she makes decisions like a lot of teens might make when things are not going well that they wouldn't make otherwise. So Char ends up being trafficked. And you can't be trafficked without some trauma. So once she makes through that thing and does make her way home, she has to deal with the trauma. And then there's Char. I have people writing me already saying, oh my God, I love her. She is probably my most nuanced, most complete character. I had to find my way into her, right? And find my way to love Char and like Char. And it turned out that it wasn't all that hard after a while. A lot of these girls like Char, we don't want to see them. We'd rather they keep moving and passing by us. And it's one way that trafficking keeps happening, right? We have like horse blinders on. And if you look at the jacket of the book, I love Char's eyes, because they basically say, see me, I'm here, I'm in your class. Didn't you notice that I don't even go to gym anymore? Can't you see me? So what I want is for people to see young girls, young African girls, especially African-American girls, especially young brown girls, especially, see them as whole and complete. Right? Sometimes you can see our pain only. Char is not just a girl in pain here. She's a girl making it to the other side. She's a girl who's reaching out and helping people and also being helped. She's a girl that's filling up people as she is being filled up. And I don't want to leave out the men, because it's easy to think that because most predators are men, that in this book I'm focusing on one, but there's some boys and men in here who are as much heroes as some of the girls. So I'm hoping you will get this book into the hands of your young readers, that you will see it as a book that that features them as well in a whole host of ways, that we don't shy away from tough subjects, and that you trust me to tell this story the way you trusted me to tell the story of Malika Madison when we were looking at colorism and bullying, and that you believe that books are for all children, that because there's a brown girl in this book doesn't mean it's not for all readers. Thank you.
Wow. Well, you certainly had my heart in your hands. As you're all saying the same throughout this entire presentation. I am so grateful for your talent, your words, really putting your heart into these stories. I just feel the future is bright and hopeful. And I love what I do, and I love what you guys do. So thank you for that. We're gonna do a little quick Q&A segment here. It's a new year, as I mentioned. I know a lot of us are thinking, what are our reading goals for 2021? I know for me, I want to read more nonfiction for obvious reasons. But also, I was thinking about what that means also for you as authors. Like, what are your book goals with this book as creators? Can you share that with us? Well, while we're thinking, I'm going to ask our viewers to also in the chat, what are your reading goals for the year? For you, for your readers? Let's share that together.
There's this whole array of stories out there by Black and brown writers that weren't around different types of stories when I started out. So I'm looking forward to reading some of those. I am writing a third book in the series, believe it or not. So John gets to tell his story. He was also in The Skin I'm In. So I think that's my reading goal, to just, sit back, kick back, read what some other people have written. That's my book goal, I guess, and to keep writing. So you can piece all that together because it's kind of rad.
Well, thank you with that breaking news. Sayantani, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think my reading and writing goals kind of overlap in that I want to read stories of joy, more stories of joy, of kids of color being awesome and joyous and brave. But Pinky, this character from Force of Fire, has also taught me that I want to read and write more stories about not being afraid of your power, about not being afraid of your voice, even if it's messy, even if you're the only one who's saying it. If you know that is true and just, I want to read more stories, but also put more stories out into the world about girls on fire, about kids on fire, putting their spark in the revolution and making this world a better place. So yeah, those are my goals. And I think Pinky taught me that one. Pinky was like, don't be afraid, say the thing, do the just thing. Don't be afraid of your fire. So that's my kind of lesson for 2021.
So I think my goal is to just read as widely as I can. And I want to write as widely as I can. I write picture books, middle grade, YA. This book, Muted in Verse, that was a big challenge for me. So who knows, maybe I'll do a graphic novel next. I don't know. I just want to read all the things that I just didn't have growing up. So that's my goal.
I will hop in here and say that Joelle and I, we have a collective goal, and that the story of Yared is not complete. And so, writing of Yared 2, for lack of a better title, obviously has to happen this year. But individually and almost kind of related is that I want to, it is a mission of mine to tell more stories inspired by stories and culture other than, and iconography other than Western literature. And so finding those epic tales, right, and drawing inspiration from them and writing them, and reading, in terms of reading goals, I want to read not just more books, not just more novels, but I want to read more poetry, and I want to read more plays, just because I feel like it helps to flesh out myself and my craft as a writer when I, and experience different types of storytelling, and helps me become a better storyteller. So I'm looking to just toss all of that in some giant red, black, and green cauldron and stir it up and spit it out in book form, because obviously that's completely how writing works. Don't let anyone tell you different.
Yeah, so I'm also very excited. Obviously, Kwame and I, we still have a lot in store for Yared and Bessa and their team. So I also want to preface by saying that I feel very grateful. Last year was a difficult year, and the ability to still do this and bring stories to people is just so gratifying, and I think helps us keep our sanity. And I'm very inspired by all of the authors here. I'm just looking forward to reading your books. I love all these different points of views and kind of takes on life, because you learn the truths of life from different people and different angles. So it's good to have a diverse group. So I'm looking forward to reading all of you. And this is my first authorial debut as an author. So I'm hoping to do more of these. I love the middle grade YA world, and I have plenty of ideas coming from my part of the world, obviously, that I feel I grew up with. And, I've not necessarily seen people really aware of them, but they're really fascinating stories. And definitely I'll just leave it with Sayantani's don't be afraid of your fire and your power and your story. I think that's going to be my motto this year, is like to keep bringing these stories so that people can get different facets, learn new territories, new boundaries, and just keep enriching the story of the peoples of the world. Thanks.
I love that. What you said about finding the truth, and what Sayantani said about your fire. I've been thinking a lot about like, what is the truth, and how the truth is so different for each and every one of us. And that's why Own Voices stories are so important, and why I've always loved reading stories that are written from the perspective of somebody that's really experiencing what they're writing about. I think it's very powerful. It's the kind of reading I want to do more of. It's the kind of reading I've always been interested in doing. My goal for 2021 is to take up more space in the world. It's something that's been a real struggle for me, and something I want my readers to take away is to take up more space. Not just readers who are struggling with their own issues, with their own struggles with body image and food, but for any reader out there who is at any point going to question their own value. And going to talk themselves out of asking for help. I think right now, especially during the pandemic, when there's so much comparative suffering, I'm hearing that all the time, like, this person has it worse than me. Well, it's okay for you to be having a hard time. And I think I really want readers to know that. I want everyone to know that it's okay to be in pain and to feel the things you're feeling, and that your feelings matter. Even if somebody else's feelings are harder and bigger, we can acknowledge their pain and also acknowledge your pain. And I really want to create space for that. I'm hoping to initiate a bigger conversation about the relationship between self-esteem and body image. It's something that is really impacting so many people. Nearly, honestly, every kid is having a hard time with this, especially right now during the pandemic. And I'm hoping that if anybody on here, if any of the authors on here are interested and have ideas for how to get this conversation out there, for how to address it. And for librarians, I'd love to hear from you. I'm really passionate about making this an inclusive conversation. So please reach out to me. And thank you. You guys are all amazing. This was awesome.
That was a great question. And thank you. I'm so glad we're ending our program on that note. There's so many things I'm going to take away with this, but I love you said, Sayantani, about finding joy. And you guys are like, your books are anchors for young people and for us as caregivers to really usher our youth, or even our own struggles and finding joy and comfort, entertainment. So grateful. Thank you. And so grateful for librarians who really, we couldn't do our work without them and how they serve their communities. These books offer adventure and standing up and fitting in. I love bionic lionesses and Rakush demons, the dynamic, complicated, friendships we have with our family, and of course, love. But one common thread I'm hearing that these stories are powerful, that there are many stories that are necessary for a just future, and that we're all responsible for making that happen. So, everyone, thank you. Take care of each other and see you in person soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.